Listen to better music and listen to music better. Welcome to True Tunes at 45 RPM, the short-form version of the ongoing conversation you'll hear on the True Tunes podcast and in the digital pages at truetunes.com. And now your host, John J. Thompson.
Hello, I'm John J. Thompson, and I was recently invited to a screening of a new independent film that really impressed me. Long December captures the quiet story of an independent singer-songwriter wrestling with a question many of my friends, many guests of this show, and I myself have wrestled with many, many times. When is it time to hang up the dream? How long can an artist wait for success? Longtime friend of the show, Chris White, writer and director of Electric Jesus, texted me repeatedly about this movie. He was insistent that I check it out. I trust Chris's sensibilities, so I did. I knew nothing about it ahead of time, but as it unfolded, I frequently found myself forgetting that it was not a documentary. Writer and director Thomas Torrey and first-time actor Stephen Williams completely pulled me in. I immediately contacted Torrey to see if we could talk to him about the film here on the podcast. His story is so close to the heart of this show and this community that I just had to let you know about it in advance of its release on November 12th. So, join me now in the virtual True Tunes interview suite for a special conversation with one of my favorite new filmmakers about one of my favorite films of 2024 and the musical movie I hope every artist, songwriter, dreamer, and fan of beautiful things makes space for this holiday season and beyond.
All right, I'll follow you. Got it, go! Baby, don't break the rules, or you break my heart. You playing the fool, that's not your part. 'Cause you ain't no gambling girl, you ain't no cheating child. You are the lady who still loves me. I am the man on the million mile.
Thomas Torrey, thank you for taking some time out. Your schedule's got to be pretty busy getting ready to release a movie, I would think. Every minute is accounted for, right?
Certainly is, between screenings and interviews and podcasts, and then the day job of the other work I do. I do documentary work for businesses. So I'm either, the last 6 weeks, there's been a new trip every week, either promoting Long December or working with a business, helping them tell their story. So it's been a lot nonstop.
So you mean you just can't become instantly independently wealthy making artsy dramas about independent artists? Fictional independent artists trying to with existential angst. It's not a cash cow.
It's not, and I remember the moment I got disillusioned to that idea because you eat the junk food growing up, loving film, go to film school, and you're like, if I just make a first film, then everything will be served to me. And I pulled together a first film way back in 2015, released it in 2017, and I got more broke as the months went on and realized, this is a marathon. This is a long game. And right. The people who make it quick, you hear about it because it's so rare. Right. And all of my fellow independent artists who I was looked up to and respected, they all had side hustles. They all had day jobs. They were teachers, educators. They had, freelance companies like I do. And I had to settle in for a long game to make art.
Tell us about Long December and what inspired the story and how this thing came about for you.
Yeah, Long December is a fictional film about a musician chasing the dream, a singer-songwriter who's wondering if his big break is around the corner, and it's sort of 1 month in his life. And it's certainly about music. There's a lot of incredible original music that we recorded for the film, but it's really about any artist who's asked, will next year be the year? or when do I got to let the dream go? And if you've been doing it long enough, December's kind of that month where you look back at the year you've had and all the hopes and dreams that you had going into the year. And the more you do it, you kind of start to get a little bit of heaviness for the following month and the following year, because you're afraid to go into that year with new hopes that maybe this year will be the year. And so that was very much how I was living my life year after year, as someone who had enough success as a filmmaker to feel validated to keep going, but not enough to really break through or achieve what I thought was my definition of success, certainly early on and for a number of years. And really when I would kind of quit the day job to pursue it full force, I had a lot of identity wrapped up in that success. And when another project fell apart, a bigger project, a project that I thought was going to be my big break, it was a script that was really hot. It got me signed to a big agency. Actors came on board, financiers came on board, and it was all happening for me. I was like, all right, this is it. This will be the year. And that was 2020. The beginning of 2020.
Should have seen that one coming, but it still surprised me.
And 6 weeks from shooting, the world shut down. And so like everyone else in the industry, we sort of just waited for the industry to restart. But over that summer hiatus, my financier pulled out completely. And the whole project fell apart and was dead. And again, this wasn't just my next film. I'd already made my first feature at that point. This was like my next film, my real film. It was much bigger. And so I had all this identity wrapped up. So the film fell apart, and sort of my identity and hopes and dreams fell apart with it. And I spent a year trying to rebuild that project. And then I finally came to a place where I had to let it go emotionally. I had to let it go, professionally, logistically, but emotionally and spiritually. And when I finally did that, I felt a freedom, because it was very much, had its grips on me. And kind of there waiting in the shadows was Long December, which was just a kernel of an idea. But I love the idea of making a music film. I'm an amateur side musician. I've played my whole life, been in bands, written songs, but it's never been something I've pursued. But I wanted to surround myself with some of my best friends and some of my favorite musicians and just make a small movie in our backyards outside of Charlotte, where I live, and just sort of make a meditation on hopes and dreams and the pain I was working out because of this other failed project. And so once I let that project go and I decided to kind of dive into Long December, it came together so quick and so effortlessly in 2021. From the idea, we had finished shooting 6 months later. It was that fast. We had the idea, wrote the script, got the people involved, talked, Stephen Williams and John Mark McMillan, my two lead actors who are musicians acting for the first time, roped them into it. We wrote the songs, raised the money. We were shooting by that Christmas of 2021.
It's interesting because in this genre, the low budget DIY thing that still looks and sounds great, but it's just the right tone for the nature of the story. Like I made it to the end and I'm like, I'm a little bit traumatized by this. And also I'm here at Lipscomb working with students, and we know that we're sending a lot of them into this world, and we're arranging to do a screening here so that they can see this and have this conversation. We talk about this, so it's not shocking. A lot of people, kind of like you're saying with film, they think, oh, I need a break, or somebody's going to hear me, and then they think that the American Idol version of life or the record deal version of life, that's what their journey. This thing, it's like the strictures, the limitations put on you by geography, budget, time, actually didn't just not work against you. They probably worked for you in terms of helping the thing feel incredibly realistic. So leaning into the weakness, leaning into the limitations, actually, did you consciously do that? Did you know, okay, this is an indie music film, so I'm going to make the film feel indie, and we don't have to spend a lot of money, or was it just what you had to do?
It's both. It was very conscious. I definitely believe in actually this idea of self-imposed restrictions or constraints, and how that can actually produce something within your art that you wouldn't have had if you just had freedom. My first film, that constraint was the entire film takes place in one location. The camera never moves, and that location's a moving car. So that was a really fun self-imposed constraint that allowed for some creative freedom. For this, we definitely had a budget constraint of how much we could raise, but also how much we were just targeting. And we wanted to keep it small because we wanted this feeling of authenticity. It's about this musician struggle, and I wanted the film to feature a lot of great music. And so that authenticity of how that music would sound and feel was really important. And nothing pulls me out of a film quicker than a lip-synced live performed song, at least for a scene that's intended to feel intimate, immediate, of the moment. Certainly song and dance musicals, have a certain design. So the self-imposed constraint for this film was that we were going to record live music. We were going to have our actors and singers perform songs, and we were going to capture them live on set. We were not going to lip sync. And that's a very scary self-imposed constraint. So for creatively, we wanted that authenticity, but then economically and logistically, it actually was a cheaper solution, because if we were going to record the songs lip synced, which would have been safer, we would have had a lot more control on the day. We would have still had to pre-record all these songs in a studio, because we were writing new songs for the film. We're covering old classic Christmas carols. We're repurposing a few, previously released songs. In all cases, they were going to have to be re-recorded somehow. So it's like, hey, let's just do it on the day in the live environment, and we will control it as best as we can. Now, because we wanted the finished film to sound live, mic bleed and that sort of things were things that we were okay with and we could live with. And we did our best. We had an amazing team of, music recording engineers that we brought in for when we were recording the musical numbers, so that we would have the best audio recording of a band or an individual vocals. And we had audiences in there, and we kept them quiet, just so, they were miming, cheering and applause. And we would capture that just like you would any other recording. So yeah, the constraints were very much creative, but very much a product of what we had to work with. I think that's why it came together so quick, because I wasn't trying to raise $1 million to do this quote unquote right or do it longer. It was an exercise in community. We were going to do a lot in a day. We were going to do it with a small team, with a small budget, and we were just going to go for it. And hopefully that whatever the warts would have been, whatever the mistakes will make, the cracks that would have happened from that process would have just added to a measure of authenticity. That's the hope.
Give it up for Gabe Lovell. Love me, holy Jesus, won't you show me how to live? I got monsters at my table, I got Bibles written like sheets. Help me, holy Lord, I see the light of heaven's porch, but so many of us are born here outside of church like this. Women in the Holy Land. You gotta fight like a boy, gotta run like a man.
So Stephen Williams, he is performing these songs, singing them. He's also an artist. He's in a band. He's this is not his actual story, but it's probably not far off. So, but this is, you said he's never acted before. So tell me about him and how you found him, what you know about him.
So Stephen Williams is he leads the band Jude Moses, and he's a bivocational artist. He's a local market musician, and he also lays tile to earn a living, depending on what part of the season he's in. He also is in the band for John Mark McMillan, who's a very successful international artist. And so Stephen's either touring with John Mark, laying tile, or performing his own music, very much like the fictional character of Gabe Lovell that I wrote. And Stephen and John Mark are both personal friends of mine. We all live in this Charlotte area together. I have known John Mark for over 20 years. We're very old, close friends. And so I've gotten to know Stephen through John Mark. And when I had the idea for this film, I hadn't written the script yet, but I knew the first thing I needed to solve was who was going to be this lead character, which musician that I knew could sort of have the heart and humanity that I wanted in this character that I was still forming, and who could act and who could, be very compelling on camera. And I knew Steven, and I just saw him perform one day, and I was like, oh man, Steven would be great. He's got a very unique quality about him. He's unconventional, and he's got a credible range, beautiful voice. And it was a neat idea. So I actually asked him later that day. I said, hey, Steven, hey, bud, you ever acted before? And he's like, no. I was like, have you ever wanted to act before? He's like, no. And I was like, okay. I was like, I got a movie idea I'd like to talk to you about. And he said, sure. And he thought I was going to, ask him to do music for a film. And then I said, look, if I can get Steven, I can cast John Mark to play this fictional sort of version of, this character's cousin, because they're brothers-in-law in real life. And if I can get both of these guys to do this movie, Steven in the lead, John Mark in the supporting role, I can actually draft off of their real life and capture great footage of them on stage together, because that's happening in a few months. There's a lot of old footage of them together that I could pull from. And they would both be comfortable as musicians acting for the first time. So I wrote the script for them without telling them.
Oh.
I did not tell them. I had the finished script. I took Steven out for a beer, and I said, here, let's talk about the movie that I wanted to talk to you about. So he's thinking I'm going to ask him to write some songs for a movie I'm doing. I slide him a script, and I say, I want you to play the lead in this film called Long December. And that started a process that lasted a few months of convincing Steven and John Mark to do the film, because they both wanted to, they're both musicians, and they had a lot to lose if they looked bad on camera, and they had no desire to act. But they ultimately decided to do it. I did a screen test with them, so I knew that they could act natural, and I wasn't asking them to do Shakespeare. They're saying lines. In fact, once they did the screen test and they read these lines, they're like, oh, I've actually had these conversations.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
I think I can do this. And so they signed on. They put a lot of faith in me. I put a lot of faith in them. I mean, Steven carries the movie. He's in every scene, and he's fantastic. He was the biggest risk, but I'm so pleased with his performance. He loved it. Again, once they signed on, we were off and running. So that's casting Steven. Part of the pitch was, there is acting, guys, but 75% of this movie is just going to be songs. We talked about the lo-fi nature of the script. The Irish film Once is a big reference point for the film. One of my favorite films, and part of that film's charm is its lo-fi DIY aesthetic to the film. And so we were slightly inspired not only by the creative constraints of Once, but also the fact that it's just a simple story about a guy and a girl, and it's mostly music. So I said, if the songs are really good, guys, the story doesn't have to be big and complex. In fact, it's the tension is just about an artist and his internal self, which is actually pretty high stakes for those of us who have lived with those tensions. But there's no great sort of external force coming against him. In fact, it's so simple that there's all these characters in the film that audiences are kind of predisposed to assuming they're the antagonist. No, they're the antagonist. And it's not that kind of movie. It's a simple film about a guy just trying to make it and people supporting him, filled with beautiful songs. And so crafting the soundtrack and writing the songs and curating the songs became the next biggest task. And so to do that, I hired my other good friend, Kevin Daly, who's a Nashville guy. He's a composer, music producer, and singer-songwriter himself. Old friend of mine as well. Again, I'm pulling together my friends, just like, hey guys, let's just make a movie together. And I said, Kevin, help me curate the soundtrack, write the soundtrack, and produce the soundtrack, because we're going to record new songs live on camera. And so we pulled together a handful of these old Christmas covers that we wanted to do new arrangements for, and Kevin and Steven worked out those arrangements. We repurposed a couple songs that Steven had written, that John Mark had written, that my brother had written, who's a great folk poet artist up in New England. He had some songs that were kind of sitting there that I wanted to repurpose for the film. And then we wrote 2 true originals for the film itself. And those 2 originals were based on songs that I had written. One was a lullaby that I had written to my daughter years ago that I never did anything with. I'm not a recording artist, so I write songs and they just sort of sit there in a notebook. And we rewrote that, and I brought together those guys, Kevin, Steven, John Mark, my brother. We finished that song. And then the big sort of song of the film is this title track called Heavy Hope. It's not a title track, but the film's called Long December, but Heavy Hope's the big sort of single. It's the song that the character's writing throughout the film, and it really embodies the themes of the film. The chorus is, when do you gotta let the dream go? And that was a chorus I had written in 2017 when I was in a really dark, depressive month of wondering when I gotta let the dream go, and I was just channeling that through my guitar. And I never did anything with it. And then once I wrote the script, realizing, oh, that's the movie. I'm gonna finish the song. I'm gonna write it with John Mark and Steven and Kevin and these songwriters better than me. And that's gonna be kind of the main theme for the film. So we did a little writer's retreat weekend, went up to the mountains and we wrote the song. And we had the soundtrack ready. And, we went off and made the film and recorded all the music as we were shooting.
When do you gotta let the dream go? If I'm crazy, would you even let me know? Would you tell me how much longer? I'm not getting any stronger. Maybe I'm just getting old. Hope is just too heavy to hold.
So you've got the Steven piece there, you've got the songs coming together, you've got this concept. Now, tell me, I love and I can see now how you as a storyteller and a filmmaker are basically leaning into the story of an independent songwriter and artist, but there's a very close parallel to the two, and it's a one-to-one relationship. Like, we can all relate to that. How do you make a story like that relevant to anybody? Like, at what point does this not just become kind of navel-gazy to us artist types, so that anybody watching this can now find an entry point into this story and go, oh, now I can see myself in a thing like Long December?
I had the same concern. I mean, I believe as an artist, the first audience for our art should be ourselves, because if we are responding to something, then hopefully there's another audience there. So I was writing what I was struggling with, dealing with, what I wanted to see in a film. And I was conscious of and questioning, to what extent is there an audience for the film? Because there's certainly an audience if you're a musician, and there's certainly an audience if you're an artist, because the musician becomes a proxy for any artist, a vocational artist. But like you're mentioning this college screening, I'll be very curious what a young starting out audience feels about the film, because it's something that people who have lived life, who have gone through it, really respond to. But I've had screenings where an 80-year-old woman who was not an artist came up to me in tears because she lived a life and she related to having a dream and questioning if that dream would happen and giving up on a dream. It's very much a film that gives you permission to let go of a dream, and it gives you permission to keep pressing into a dream. And anyone who's had that experience, whether you're an artist or not, has found deep resonance with the characters and with the themes. So that's been really encouraging. I suppose there's people who haven't dreamed, and if that's the case and they can't relate to the character, then maybe they'll just enjoy the music, because it's got a pretty damn good soundtrack. So
Color now, wonder how dusk and dawn could be so far. Naked trees, winter freeze, truth is here, light up the dark. Oh, 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 oh. Raise your head and I'll look to the wind. I will carry on, and I
to me, there's you talk about the antagonist, you keep wondering, oh, the record company guy's going to be the antagonist. Oh, the wife's going to be the antagonist. She's going to be the one. At some point, her niceness is going to fall apart. And you're thinking, she's just so supportive and so believable. But at some point, she's going to go, okay, enough's enough. But she doesn't. I kept thinking, the antagonist here is just frickin' gravity. Like gravity is always working against us. Gravity is holding us to the ground. We just can't fly. Like that's the problem, is gravity. And one of the characters, I was having a little bit of PTSD, like with how relevant. I'm like, I forgot it was a scripted film at one point, and I started feeling like I was watching a documentary about 100 of my friends. But at one point, one of the smaller side characters, he just shares something that's kind of enlightens the tension and says, well, maybe there's just a different way to think about this. Like maybe there isn't an antagonist in this thing. Maybe this is just how you frame your dream. Maybe it isn't even about giving up on the dream. Maybe you just have to shift how you understand it. So,
and in many ways, the antagonist in that analysis is perspective, which was my experience. I went through life as someone with a very binary perspective of success, ambition, hopes, because of partly how I'm wired. And I was writing this Gabe character that mirrored the same tensions, really looking at things like all or nothing. Stephen, to his credit, is not like that. Stephen is much more zen. Stephen is much more enlightened as an artist. Because I was telling him as we were going through the script, don't you have that desperation of like, no, I got to make it. I got to be famous. I got to achieve. And he's like, no, I'm kind of content. And I was like, okay, well, I do. And this character is me. And so, if the antagonist is internal, all these people around his life are there kind of just supporting him. This film got finished, in Hollywood. My sound mixer's based out there, and he does a lot of films, mixing a lot of films, horror films, all these, sees a lot come through his door. And he was like, Thomas, this is the most refreshing film I've seen, because there's no assholes in the film. Right. And it was sort of a breath of fresh air. And I was like, I know that was kind of by design, because as I was writing it and contemplating, should I inject external stakes, antagonists? I was like, that's not my experience of life. The people I meet, my wife, my friends, the industry people, they're all kind of just hoping I'll get there. They're helping me along. And so the people he meets throughout the film are ahead of him, and they're just there helping him along. And it was kind of countercultural, subversive to write a script with that. It doesn't really follow the rules of, you're supposed to have an antagonist. And I was just like, right. I don't want to do that. It's a risk,
I pray you wake up in the morning with a smile. May your dreams be what the angels see. Dream, my baby. Dream, my baby, dream.
Is this a musical? Like Chris White, by the way, another mutual friend. Chris has a small role in this. I worked with Chris as the music supervisor on Electric Jesus.
Absolutely.
We were tied at the hip for years on that thing. Chris and I remember, and I'll probably get this wrong, but we were talking about was Electric Jesus a musical? No, because the music wasn't propelling the plot. It was adjacent to the plot. So you can have a music movie, but it wasn't a musical. In your mind, is this a musical? And what in your mind makes a film a musical versus just being a movie with a lot of music?
It's a great question. You and Chris both define musical more strictly than I would. I would say yes, Long December is a musical. And sometimes I get a kick out of telling people, hey, I made a Christmas musical, and letting them envision a very different kind of film than what I actually made. Because you think of song and dance, you think of, Christmas trees, and it's melancholy and somber, and all the songs are diegetic to the film. They are coming from within the story. Now, I do think it's a compelling argument to define a musical as something where the songs move the story forward. I would, even by that definition, I think you can call a musical songs that aren't necessarily moving plot forward, but maybe are revealing internal thought, which is usually how a lot of songs go in musicals. The character is singing what they're thinking. And all the songs in the film, at least all of the original songs, follow that same model. The first song he sings is a blues song in the pub, and it's a great song. But if you listen to the lyrics, it's called "Poor Boy Legacy." I'm going to leave to my son everything my daddy left for me, and that is actually saying something about an internal dynamic with the character and his newborn baby son. And then, of course, "Heavy Hope," which is the big anthem that we lead up to, is the song he's writing throughout the film, but lyrically, it's the things he is learning. So these aren't songs that a character's performing to move a plot forward, but they do represent internal themes. So I would say very much, yes, it's a musical. But I would actually define Electric Jesus and Once as musicals, because I think I would just define it a little looser than you guys, where, it's about it's a movie, an action movie. It's like, if it's got action scenes, yeah, it's an action movie. If it's got funny lines, it's a comedy. If it's got a lot of music, let's call it a musical. Of course, it can be other things as well.
Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt his word.
You definitely see music propelling the plot and revealing character all the way through it. There's no song and dance. And the Christmas element of this is interesting. In your case, this is like not only a musical I want to watch, it's a Christmas movie I want to watch, because you use the songs so carefully. And if you're even paying attention, when we actually notice which Christmas songs you're using and what the lyric of that song means, and then you put it in a pub, and these people are all in the pub at Christmas Eve, and this moment happens of generosity, and it's layers and layers of generosity. And oh my gosh, I'm thinking, this is the way that you allow God with us, this Emmanuel concept, to just be told in a story in a beautiful way that doesn't have to be couched as a Christian story. It just, nobody's going to get up and go, oh, now I feel preached to. Like, everybody's going to go, yeah, man, that's what we want Christmas to be. So I'm like, this is a Christmas musical. But so well done on that, to get a cynic like me to go, okay, there's a Christmas movie I can add to my list of things I can.
Well, and I'm so pleased that you picked up on kind of everything we were trying to achieve in that final scene. But you're also responding to a type of holiday movie that is so few and far between. I feel like there is an underserved market for this sort of authentic, melancholy kind of holiday film. There's a handful I can think of, but only a handful. And none of them have songs, so it's kind of a unicorn in that. Right. But the whole idea was birthed from watching a video on YouTube. Speaking of Once, Glenn Hansard, who's the lead singer of Once, is the singer of The Frames. He and Bono, two Irish musicians, on Christmas Eve will sing Christmas carols in the streets of Dublin, surrounded by hundreds of drunken Dubliners. And this one particular video, Bono starts leading the audience in "O Come Let Us Adore Him." These old Christmas songs, which are actually Christian hymns, like they're these sacred songs of, worship to God. And there was something so sacred and beautiful about what I was watching in this video of all these drunken Dubliners singing in unity, solidarity, harmony with these two superstars who are right there, not on a stage, right beside them. And it touched me, and I said, I want to capture that in a film. And so as I was developing the script, it was all kind of to lead up to a moment like that, where the character's not on stage. He's not, he hasn't achieved the great hopes and dream he's thought he has, but he's in a pub on Christmas Eve with a handful of people, a homeless guy, everyone's drunk, and it becomes a sacred place that he is facilitating, Emmanuel, God with us. And so that was very much what we were trying to earn. So for you, the fact that we earned it at least a little bit means a lot. There's also something and I realized this after I made the film, if you want to get sort of theology nerd level, you could call it a Christmas film, but I would almost call it an Advent film, which of course is the Christian holiday before Christmas, because Advent means
season. It's a whole season.
It's a whole season. It's a season of waiting. It's a season of coming. And so for a film about an artist waiting for the next year, Advent becomes this tension, this season of tension where we are waiting for God. And so it struck me that, oh man, this is really very much an Advent film. And it's interesting that is entwined with a calendar that where a year ends and a year begins, because you can be non-religious and not practice any of these religious holidays, and December still becomes this heavy month where you're looking back at the year you've had and you're cautiously waiting and hoping for the next year. So it works on all those levels, and that was really why I wanted to sort of set it within that season.
Sometimes you gotta let your dreams go, even though the night roads look narrow. When the morning sun is bright, I can see it in the light. These roads look more like open meadows. I hear the dreamer's song. I've heard it all along. I can carry on with this heavy heart.
So what is the plan for this? Like, how will people find it? And
Sure.
What's the release? And
It'll come out November 12th. So depending on when you're listening to this, it's you can watch it on all of the digital VOD platforms. So Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, wherever you rent a film digitally or buy a film digitally, you'll be able to watch this film. Sometime in 2025, we will have then sort of a streaming release, because a lot of people are just they're only watching what they subscribe to on their streaming platforms. So we will be in streaming platforms in 2025, but for the remainder of this year, the final 2 months of 2024, you'll be able to watch it on VOD platforms. We had a great festival run. We premiered the film last fall. We've been touring it around the country in festivals all year, and then we sold it over the summer, and our distributor wanted to get it out before the Thanksgiving holiday and try to get a head start on some of that. So the soundtrack is out now. You can listen to the soundtrack wherever you stream music, and then November 12th is when you can watch it. And @longdecember.movie is our Instagram, so that's where you can just go there and find everything about the film.
will there be any kind of live events where Steven goes out and plays the songs and you screen the film and all the stuff that Once did? Because that's what broke Once, was Hansard coming over and playing shows, playing the songs at clubs, and then playing the movie, and that's what made that happen. That's what Chris and I wanted to do with Electric Jesus, was put the band on the road, and
I know.
Just COVID screwed it all up.
We have big dreams about a whole tour that we could do for the film. Of course, we're still an indie with very little resources, so we're doing something that's almost a little bit more of something stripped back, doing like a pub tour, because this Irish pub is so central to the film, but there is something about the pub life, the pub community, that kind of evokes the greater themes of community. So we're like, let's book pubs to where we can show the film, and it's okay if it's noisy because people can go home and watch it in the quiet, but we'll show the film. It's mostly songs anyway. Steven will be there, maybe John Mark if he can make it, and they'll jump up on the bar and, lead us in sing-alongs after the film. So we're doing that through the month of December, and we're going to film that, and our hope is that we can sort of empower pubs all across the country. Hey, do a long December night. You don't need us. Show the movie. Get a singer-songwriter to sort of play some songs after, and just have this be a night of community in sort of this Christmas season. So we're doing a pub tour, and then we are doing a little bit of sort of private screenings. Chris is actually doing a screening in Greenville for us, which is fun, and we just did one in Nashville. But yeah, as far as all systems go, we'll be pushing out the digital release and doing this pub tour, and then just trying to get the word out.
Jesus, Lord, at thy birth.
run-out groove is coming, and that means it's time to go. If you dig the show, please subscribe and spread the word. Also, please leave us a review and a rating at Apple Podcasts, subscribe to our email list at truetunes.com, follow us on Facebook at TrueTunesNow, and find and follow our weekly Spotify Gallery Stage mixtape. And you can support this show through our patreon.com/TrueTunes community or via a one-time tip linked on the show notes page. Tell your friends about the show, post it on your socials, and let us know what you think.
True Tunes at 45 RPM is produced by John J. Thompson and Bruce A. Brown for Gyroscope Productions and is intended for the private use of our listening audience. The contents are protected by US copyright law and are the intellectual property of Gyroscope Productions, with the exception of songs or clips that are from previously copywritten materials. Everything on this episode is used by permission or under fair use provisions. Thanks for listening. Cheers. We'll see you next time.